Hey, what's happening, everybody? I'm Larry Roberts, and this is another episode of the Readily Random Podcast.
Hey, you could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl.
You know, I realized, man, I've been absent to a certain degree. I've been putting on best ofs and just trying to keep the show going, keep content coming at you. And doing the best ofs was an opportunity for maybe some of the newest listeners to realize what they're missing out on if they don't go back and listen to some of the first episodes, because some really good stuff. May not be quite as polished as I am today because I'm all pro now that we're nearly 100 episodes in, but still great content. Today, I have someone with me that I found out about. Actually, she was pitched to me from an agency, and I thought, man, I'm not real big on agencies pitching me much anymore because it kind of got redundant. I have the same entrepreneur on here telling the same story, and now they have all the same answers. But then I read her bio, and I went to her website, and I watched her video, and I reviewed her book, and man, it's just great stuff. And so today I have Teru Clavel with me, and Teru is an education specialist. And this really rings true to me because, as most of you know, I've been a professional trainer since I was, 25, 26 years old at Texas Instruments here. And then I went on to teach martial arts for 20 some odd years as well. So teaching, although I don't teach formally, teaching is my profession to a certain degree. Training, teaching, to me, they're fairly synonymous. Maybe there's a differentiation that Teru could point out for me. But her education credentials far exceed mine. So let's go ahead and talk to Teru and let her kind of share her background and her story and maybe what motivated her to choose this path for her life. So Teru, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Larry. Loaded question. So let's see. I have a master's in comparative and international education, and that likely came about because I grew up speaking Japanese in my home and being raised by an immigrant mom from Japan. I lived in a culturally Japanese home, but then outside in the world, living mostly in the New York City area, everything was very American. And I went to the kind of perfunctory Saturday Japanese school to maintain my Japanese language skills. And in the summers and during a lot of vacations, I was in Japan visiting family. And I even went to school in Japan during some of that time. So I grew up in the US and I see these different cultural practices in the classrooms between and language and just general cultural practices between the US and Japan. And then fast forward a whole bunch, in 2006, I have this opportunity to move to Hong Kong. And at that point, I have two small children under 2. And it was one of these, okay, let's get up and move. It's kind of how I was raised, being exposed to different cultures. So from 2000 to 2006 until 2010, I was in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong in 2009, my third child was born. And then the following 2 years, from 2010 until 12, I was in Shanghai. And then 4 years after that, until 2016, I was in Tokyo. And then I came back to the United States. And I became an education journalist. And I really had this idea for a book while I was an education journalist, but it really came to fruition when I came back to the United States and I had my kids in public schools in the US. And I thought, wow, there's a great dialogue here, and we can learn so much from the different education systems of the different countries where I lived.
So you went to Hong Kong. Did you already speak Mandarin or Cantonese, or did you have any ability to speak the language there in Hong Kong, or was it a learning experience for you as well?
That was definitely a learning experience. The local language is Cantonese. I don't still speak a lick of it. It's a very, very difficult language. It has 7 tones, unlike the 4 for Mandarin. And my kids, actually, I enrolled them in a local public school that was 100% in Mandarin. So even there, the teachers only spoke Mandarin and my kids learned to speak Mandarin, but it was very, very difficult for me to understand anything that was going on. And it was only when we got to Shanghai that I was finally able to speak some Mandarin. But that was literally by necessity, because in Hong Kong, quite a few people did speak English.
Okay, so that's how you got by was people there actually spoke English.
Very much so, yeah. Not everyone, but for the most part, you could get by, and signs were in were in English, but in Shanghai it really was very, very difficult. There were times, we have that great China firewall and GPS doesn't work, Google is blocked kind of a thing. So if you were lost, like you were literally just lost. Like I remember being in the middle of the former French concession in Shanghai, and it was, I don't know, 8 or 9 at night, and nobody spoke English. I was on a bicycle. I mean, it was awful. The GPS shut down. It was just, I didn't know how I was going to get back. I was very lost, like literally just lost.
Wow. And that's got to be extremely scary. I mean, because you're definitely in a country you don't speak the language. You're in a country you're not overly familiar with. You have your children. I don't know if they were with you on the bicycle. I don't know how you got around with children on the bicycle. It's just something that I have a hard time comprehending. Just for the simple fact, I very rarely even leave Texas. So,
they say it's a country unto itself, so maybe you're okay.
I reckon they're right. But it's interesting. They tease me at work because they say that I have a 5-mile radius. My wife and I both, we work at the same office, so we're never apart. And we have a 5-mile radius because our house is less than 5 miles from the office. And you can literally draw a 5-mile radius around the house and the office, and that's our zone. That's where we're at. So very rarely do we expand beyond that, much less to a country we're unfamiliar with languages that we don't speak, and lack of the internet.
Yeah, that was, wow. It toughened you up, though, I have to say. It definitely made me a better person.
You kind of have to, because it's a survive or thrive situation, or it's a thrive or die situation, really, because you're either going to learn it or you're going to get really hungry. And you're not going to have utilities. I mean, there's a whole lot to it over there.
There was. And, I was so naive going in. I thought, China, the wild, wild west, it's this amazing place with such incredible growth. And, we were there from 2010 to 12. And what that really means is that when the economy is growing at such a rapid pace, it means nothing is staying the same. I mean, it's certainly exciting, but you could be away from one part of the city for 2 to 4 months and you go back and there's it's all gone. It's completely a new development. I mean, it's the speed of change. I mean, we lived in an old lane and literally there would be people who would be living in really kind of, the socioeconomically disadvantaged circumstances. And literally within a week, it would seem, sometimes overnight, they would be pulling up in a Mercedes. And you're like, wait, what just happened? But that's what the growth was like. It was like just one night you hit it out of the ballpark, and it was remarkable.
Wow,
it was
that's
absolutely
extremely
remarkable.
Cool. It'd be interesting to witness that like you did. I've heard through the grapevine, we actually have one of our facilities is in Hong Kong as well. So I've heard some stories from the guys. They've offered to send me, and I was like, no. But so I'll pass on that. Thanks. But I hear stories about how quickly they operate there as compared to here in the States, as far as maybe infrastructure, maintenance, just everything is at a higher pace and should I say a higher quality than some of the things we do here in the States. And I'm not dissing America or anything here, folks. Just hang on. I'm just hearing, I've heard there's differences.
There are. There's this little story that I sometimes tell, which is there was a segment on TV. There's a store in Tokyo called Tokyo Loft, and it's kind of like this cool home goods type store, and they have a section of umbrellas, just umbrellas. And you go in. I mean, typically when it's raining, you can run into like a Dwayne Reed or CVS, just buy an umbrella and run out. And you kind of think, okay, if it's cheap, it's fine because I just need it for that time being, and we'll just throw it away. But this area at Tokyo Loft, guess how many umbrellas they have? Or no, guess how many kinds of umbrellas they have?
Hundreds.
Okay, so give me a number. I'm going to hold you to this.
Okay, I'll say 150.
150. And we're talking not a large area of the store.
Right.
They have 1,500 different kinds of umbrellas.
Oh my God.
Right. And I bring that number up because, they have different shapes and sizes and double fold, triple fold, different materials and patterns, and it can go upside down, and different handles and fabrications, and different qualities, and some for gifts, and it's remarkable. And I say all that because, just like you mentioned, different speeds. It's like they have mastered the umbrella, right? Like if you want a great umbrella, Go to Japan. They've mastered it. It's kind of like they take things to another level.
Right.
And so that's something that's, that's kind of the same as what you were saying. And, in terms of the speed and I would say it's efficiency too. It's a remarkable thing to watch. Oh, this is a story for you. So one day the kids just had literally in elementary school, my son had just finished second grade, my oldest, and he had finals. And they have finals like you do in college, like a week of final exams and all their subjects. Second grade in elementary school. Okay. And I'm looking through the little window of the math department teachers because it's subject specific teachers already starting in first grade. So you have one teacher for math, one for your language, one for English and science and so on and so forth. And I'm looking through the window and I kid you not, these teachers who are correcting these math final exams were machines. I mean, they literally were like, check, 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 lick the thumb, turn the page, check, 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 check. It was, and because they have to go through, I don't know how many exams. I mean, there were 6 classes per grade and there are 30 to 40 kids per class. So, you can do the math and it was remarkable. I was like, wow, that is because they had, they took their exams and they had to give the exams back to all the students within the week. It was amazing.
That is amazing. And that kind of points, we're already talking about education a little bit there. That's a great lead in actually to transition to the educational systems in China and in Japan as compared to here in the United States. I work with a gentleman and his wife is a principal of a fairly large school here in North Dallas. And the stories that he tells me are just mind-boggling. And the difficulties that the teachers go through in an effort to simply teach and maintain control over their classrooms while they do it. It blows my mind, honestly. I don't understand how we even have an education system here based on some of the stories that I've heard. In contrast, I went to a private school growing up my whole life. And so my graduating class, get this, the number was 5.
You had 5 students in your graduating class?
Yes.
That's not a private school. That's like a, I don't even know what to call that. That's like a private tutor school. What was it? Was it a K through 12?
It was K through 12. And honestly, they had started having some difficulties. And my year was the last full year of the school, which is regrettable because I always fantasized about graduating, then coming back and hanging out at lunch and me being the big guy, Oh yeah.
But that's
never got to
I don't
happen.
understand what that means, a full year. There was like less than 5?
No, see, no. I'm not sure exactly what the number was of the senior class the next year, but overall, the entire school shut down. They were going through some political issues because it was a Christian school, between the church and the school. And because of the lack of students, we were having a hard time maintaining their accreditation. So there were all kinds of things going on that caused the school to falter. But the class before mine was probably one of the biggest classes that ever graduated from the school. And it was still sub 30.
Wow.
But in contrast, that out of my class of 5 and the previous class of less than 30, there were 2 students that made a perfect score on their SATs.
Wow.
And they got married, and now he's a professor of mathematics at Dallas Baptist University, and she is heavily involved in a private school as well. I don't know exactly. But anyway, so they stayed in the education realm, but Danny, he's the smartest guy I ever met in my whole life, other than probably you.
I love that. I'll take the compliment. That's so funny.
But it's just a contrast to show that size of the classes here and the hands-on instruction that I received was extremely beneficial compared to what I see in public schools here.
Yeah. So talking about what your friend said, I mean, does he teach at does he run a high school?
His wife runs a high school. Yeah, it's his wife.
Yeah,
and she runs a high school.
His wife. So, what really happens here is we have such and we have, and I don't want to just say diversity, like, that we throw out this word all the time, but our socioeconomic diversity in this country anywhere really is so vast that we talk about early childhood education. And by the time our kids get into, because it's not compulsory, right? You don't have to legally go to school until you're in kindergarten in the United States. And by the time these kids are 5, maybe 6 years old and they're starting school, there's some kids who can read And some kids who've never even held a pair of scissors, some kids who've never even held a book.
Right.
And then you have such difference already for these kindergarten teachers. And then when you think about that, how they basically go from year to year, and then their home influence is so strong too, right? You have some parents who maybe they have masters and PhDs, right? And then you have some parents who don't speak English at home and they're immigrants and maybe they work multiple jobs. They don't get to spend a lot of time at home. And I visited schools. I went across the country in the 2017-18 academic year, and I visited a lot of basically failing schools. And a lot of these kids, they don't have parents at home. They're in foster care. Some parents are in prison. They're raised by grandparents. And what ends up happening is by the time you get to high school, the variation that the teachers have to deal with within one classroom is so extreme. And then I interviewed a board member of the Los Angeles Unified School District. LA has the second largest school district in the country after New York City. And they're running it's not even a business. I mean, they have millions of people involved and they have to provide housing. They have their own police department. They have lockdown drills. They have, building. They have, it goes transportation, and how much of their attention is diverted from actual classroom instruction.
Right.
And it's, they have human resources and payroll and unions. And it's like, well, we wonder how these kids are learning when most of these teachers' attentions and administrators are going to completely irrelevant kind of areas to the instruction in the classroom. It's
Right.
really, it's incredible.
I think that's something that people don't take into consideration when people tend to complain about the schools here in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Both my children, I got very lucky. They took after, me. And
I'm sure your wife has something to do with it, but we'll let that go for now.
we'll ride that one out. But, they both went through the public schools, and they both have very high quality degrees. One's from Texas A&M and one's from Texas Wesleyan University here in North Texas. And they seem to excel even in a public school environment. So I have to assume there's potential, well, not potential, there's definitely exceptions to the rule. But I think a lot of it is that, do you feel like, and this is just my opinion, and I think there's a lack of discipline overall in children these days, and going into the classroom, that lack of discipline can definitely be impactful to the entire class. And do you see that as a potential impact as to what we're experiencing these days?
Big time. And it was a big shock for me coming back to the US when I, at that point, had a middle schooler and two elementary school children, on the heels of where we were in East Asia, where the discipline is part and parcel with learning. It's part of the learning. You learn to sit still. You learn to respect the teacher. You learn to organize your belongings. You don't wear a hat. You don't chew gum. You learn to clean up after yourself. And the amount of, and this is controversial what I'm saying. I don't toe the party line where I think kids should have the freedom to choose so much of what they get to choose in this country. It's like, kindergartners don't have the ability to make all these decisions. And if they do, they may not be the right ones. There are certain things that just, you have to learn this stuff, or you have to learn to sit still. And the number of classrooms I visited, where I remember there's this one classroom I visited where there were, I think, 5 or 6 different kinds of seats for the kids to choose from in first grade. I mean, there was a toadstool, there was a rocking toadstool, there was a regular stool, there was a yoga ball, there was a regular chair, and I'm probably forgetting a bunch of different kinds of chairs.
Wow.
I remember the kids walking in and they had to choose what kind of chair they wanted to sit in. And I was going, I don't really understand the purpose of that. But not only that maybe 5 minutes of time taken to them deciding what kind of chair they want could be spent learning, how to spell, for example.
Sure.
And then when you see the school breakdown in budgets, it's like, well, what happened to the chairs? What if, it's expensive to have that many different kinds of chairs. And so, when you really get into it, I feel like this whole freedom of choice and where it's manifested, and I think most exemplary, is in our technology. Kids are given tech at such a young age and they can jump around. They're not accountable necessarily to what they have to learn, and they're exposed to all kinds of things they really shouldn't be exposed to. And we're not even talking about, social media and bullying and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's kind of like, if you don't teach the kids discipline, I went to an 8th grade classroom, and I write about this in my book, World Class. I observed the social studies classroom, and the kids, for the most part, when you walked around the class, they were playing games, they were listening to music, they were on social media, but the school didn't have enough money to cover textbooks for everyone. So they were doing their reading on their smartphones.
Wow.
And you're going, well, how? I mean, it's very hard for adults who aren't millennials, who weren't raised on this stuff, to focus when there's so many distractions online. But if that's the only thing that comes down to discipline. It's a big problem. And I'm going to say something controversial here, but I'm very much against the whole personalized learning movement. I don't think children should have a personally crafted curriculum on technology, because frankly, when in life do we get to decide everything we want to do? And we look at a failure to launch for a lot of these kids these days. And, they're not learning to fail, to be resilient, to be, just sometimes you got to do what you don't want to do.
Right. And they don't have to these days.
They don't have to.
There is nothing in place to say, this is your path. You're going this way. I just saw a recent post on Instagram, and a lot of people like this. It was on some kind of a hashtag parenting kind of a thing. How, we're so nice to our kids these days. They can take a test multiple times until they pass. And isn't that a beautiful thing? And I can't remember the last time someone passed the cookie tray to me a million times and it was always available to me. You know what I mean? Like, exactly.
I don't know. Sometimes in life, oftentimes there's one chance.
And it makes you wonder, how do movements like these gain any traction? Because as adults, you should already know, or at least you would think you would know, that if you're at the office or a manufacturing facility or whatever your path takes you down, you still get one shot 99% of the time to get it right. Your boss comes, says, here, do this. If you do it wrong, what happens? Well, you get shown the door if you do it enough, right? I mean, it's not going to happen the first time, but you just don't have those choices. We don't get to take, for instance, they just incorporated a curriculum, a cross-training curriculum at my office. I've been there 21 years. I know pretty much what's going on. So, but they're going into detail, and they're making us take tests. And we have to take their open book. Most of the questions are open book, but we go in, we have some training, and we come out. And if we fail, we get one shot to take it again. So hopefully you don't fail, because, I mean, most of the people taking these have been there for quite some time. But if you fail the second time, you don't get it, and your performance review is severely impacted by your lack of accomplishment in the cross-training function. So that's in itself shows you're not going to get to take this test as many times as you need to in order to pass. And that's not a good thing, because if somebody comes to me and says, Larry, what do we do over here in this department? Well, I don't know. Well, you've been here 21 years. Why don't you know? Well, I'm never over there. You should know what's going on. Why are you there? And how do you fit into that cog? And it's the same thing in school. Why are you there? You're there to learn all of the basics before you get out in the world and start making a hopeful impact.
Yeah, it's a very confusing time, I think, for kids as their anxiety levels increase, and we've seen depression skyrocket. You see college offices, counseling offices not able to meet the needs of all the students because they're overwhelmed. There are just too many kids who need to overcome, I would say, just to simplify it, a lot of issues with anxiety.
What is
and
that?
But it's like someone told me recently, it's like the 12th place trophy. And I said, what are you talking about? It's like, oh yeah, because if you come in 12th, you can still win a trophy. And there is like something really beautiful about it. It's like, hey, kumbaya, we're all happy. We can all win. But at the same time, ironically, we're a nation that's really, really like obsessed with sports, right?
Of course.
And in sports, there's always a winner.
Right.
And there's a loser.
Right.
And if you look at, we talked about, briefly coaching and training, but coaches are on the sidelines, oftentimes yelling, at their players, and if they fall out of step, then, however many push-ups or laps around the field. And it's okay for them to be tough, with winners and losers.
Right.
But at the same time, like in the classroom, right, there are multiple tries these days. And and I think it's really frustrating for those kids who actually want to be more academically competitive or more able, because they're like, listen, I get it the first time. Why is it fair that some other guy gets the same grade as I get, and he needed 5 tries?
Right.
And it's a hard thing to figure out.
You've got me on a soapbox.
Oh gosh. Well, if it was working, great, but unfortunately, many people talk about the millennial generation as kind of this lost generation, and it's really hard to employ them, and they go straight to the boss, and like the boss's boss kind of a thing. And
right.
And at the same time, I have a lot of sympathy for them, because look at the way we're educating them.
Exactly. And it's so difficult to understand. And, I came from a house that was severely disciplined. And when I say severe, Dad, he loved a belt, and he loved, for some reason, attaching it to the behind. And I did not appreciate it.
You turned out all right for whatever reason. So
against all odds, I still made it here. So, but the thing is that I always thought maybe there was a happy medium. And in direct contrast to the way I was raised, I never raised a hand to my daughter. Didn't feel it was appropriate to smack her, but I could give her a look and she knew what was up, right? Little gruff voice. I have a pretty deep voice. And if I'm mad, and she gets scared. Yeah. And plus she'd seen me in the karate and all that. And she took martial arts under me and this sort of thing. So
that's intimidating.
Exactly, right? She seen me break bricks and stuff. She's like, oh, he can break bricks. He can break me. So that was the whole idea. But my son, I didn't spank him either. Not even per se. I didn't spank him. But I would give him just a little, I say little, but it was a smack right here, because this is the hardest part of the head. So I would just give him a little on the head, and that's an attention getter. And that's really all it was for. So I didn't feel the need to beat the crap out of him or anything, but I needed to get his attention sometimes, because he was like me, just squirrel, So, but it worked out. It worked out just fine. And we didn't have any disciplinary problems as they grew up. Yeah. They didn't get any serious trouble. So, and they focused, but there was still structure, and that, I think the lack of structure, it's just pouring into our entire culture, which I think is in direct contrast to what you see in the Asian cultures, whether it's in China or in Japan. Structure is uniform throughout both countries. Now, I'm speaking just on assumptions and from what I've read and seen and studied in that regard, because obviously I've never been out of my 5-mile circle. But
no, but what you're saying, I mean, I'm sure plenty of people have seen videos of the kids, lined up when they have assemblies, and they're lined up typically in height order, and they're even marching, and when I came to the US, the first day of elementary school, at both my middle child and my youngest school, the kids are standing there, they're playing with their shoelaces, they're twirling their hair, they're not looking forward. Some people are pledging the allegiance, some aren't. They're talking to each other. And I just never witnessed that where I was in East Asia. You stood up straight. At the entryway in Shanghai, the kids saluted their teachers and their principal when they walked in. In Japan, you bow at the start of the class and at the end of the class to the teacher, and you thank them for the learning. And, it's like what I'm sure what you experienced in practicing martial arts. There is a necessary discipline. And it's that, it's that line. It's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And there are no shortcuts.
Right.
And these days, especially with technology, I mean, remember the bump you have on your middle finger because you wrote so much with a pencil?
Right. The callus.
Right.
Yeah. Right,
yeah. The callus.
There. Yeah,
right.
Right there. Yep.
Right. We all have those, but these days, I mean, with autocorrect, spell check, grammar check, it's like, there's not that investment. And remember like writing with a pencil, and like, if you made a mistake somewhere early on, it was like, oh my God, you had to erase everything, the whole page, and maybe the page would rip. And like you were really careful with your word choice because you didn't want to do that. These days, there's like no investment in any of it. You just copy, paste, delete. Not
exactly.
A big deal.
Hit print and off you go. There's your paper.
There you go. There he is.
Yeah, it's amazing. And again, I see it pouring into our overall culture. I see it pouring into our industries, our professions. And it scares me. It literally scares me because we're falling behind. A lot of people still say we're a world power, but we're not really the top of the food chain anymore.
Well, that's the thing. And it's, Sometimes I'll talk about this with audiences when I speak, and their eyes kind of glaze over and they don't really understand what we're talking about. But basically, I think the easiest way to explain it is compulsory education in, let's say, Japan and China ends at the end of middle school. So they're finished with their required learning by the age of 15.
Wow.
And tests have shown that they are literally 2 years to 3 years ahead in math. So if you think about that, they are at our high school senior graduate level as 15-year-olds. And then they have 3 more years of education, and that's ahead of whether or not they, if they go on to university, then even more.
Right.
And then we wonder about the Chinese students, not all, but the high achieving ones that come to the US and go to university here or pursue graduate degrees. And you look at, more than half of our STEM graduate programs are Asian. And that includes Indian and Chinese and Korean. And it's no wonder. They're literally years ahead. And what people I don't think necessarily realize is it's not like they're staying here to contribute to our economy. They're going back home.
Right.
And hopefully there's a lot of international collaboration and research and development going on, but we are not this powerhouse that we really used to be. And if education is the most important input into our labor force, then we gotta up our game.
100%. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And we're going to, I think people have, and I'm not going to go on another tangent here, but we have so many issues that are out there these days that really shouldn't necessarily be issues. And I think it's a sign of things are too good. America has it literally in some areas. Now, granted, there are definitely underprivileged areas as well. But in an overall concept, we all seem to think that we have it so good. And if you think you have it too good, well, now you're going to start griping and complaining and finding these other issues when really the issues lie at the root of everything here. That's why you're seeing shanty towns in L.A. You've got Skid Row in L.A. You've got Chicago going crazy. There's so many places. South Dallas is nuts. There's so many places that are collapsing in on themselves. And it's always a sign of when you have it too good, you get soft. And we've gotten soft in so many areas, and it all starts with the way we're training our children.
I think so. It's such a shame. There's the intergenerational mobility these days is worsening literally by the decade. So, whereas a generation ago, or maybe say 2 generations ago, you said, okay, education may have been the gateway to success. And these days, so much of your future is totally dependent on what socioeconomic level you were born into.
Right.
And it's insane. Like, what's the purpose of education if you work your butt off and you're going to school and your school is failing? And even if you are a top student in that school, the chances of you launching and going to a top university their odds are against you.
Right. 100%.
And it's such a shame when I think about this country where we charge more for college tuition than any other developed country in the world. And when I do the calculations, I want to fall over for my 3 kids, when they go to college, and in most developed countries, the best universities are not only free, they're public.
Right.
And when you think about that, it's like, yes, education is a public good. We should have a mandate to educate everybody equitably so that everybody can get the education they need to contribute to society and to the economy. And right now, what are we doing? We're making this something that only those who are privileged can really pursue and not be penalized by with years and years of college debt.
Oh, you're 100%.
Or even be prepared for college. I mean, the whole thing, it's kind of this insidious cycle. And I really hope that, our legislators really listen to this and change our funding models and create fair, literally no child left behind, and not make it a joke. Like, really, no child should be left behind.
Yeah, now it's just a campaign slogan. So
it really is. It's like a mockery, which is really, really unfortunate.
Well, on that positive note.
Oh no, I want to. Let's say something funny. Yeah.
No, and the thing is, it's hard to make it positive because it's just true. It's just a fact, and you can spin it however you want, but the facts are the facts. It's the truth, and sometimes that's a little harsh. So aside from harsh truths, You are an author. You are a very
I
accomplished
am.
author. I'm an Arthur too. Go ahead if you would. Tell us about your book and where we can find it and all that fun stuff.
Great. Yeah. So you can find it most probably readily on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Hopefully your independent bookseller carries it. And it's about how I raised my kids in the public schools of Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, and then California. But it's very, I think, easy to read. People say they can kind of read it in one sitting because it's got a lot of funny stories. And it's, I would say, 40 to 50% memoir with 50% really easy to digest research and takeaways. So I think it's a way to, so I guess the best way to put it may be, I think about the US education system as like the great Swiss cheese, where there are so many holes in our education system. Larry, you've bent over. Have I lost you?
I fell asleep. No, I fell asleep. I'm sorry. You're just like, no.
I know,
I'm kidding.
he fell asleep. I'm
No.
sorry, listeners. I put Larry to sleep, so I hope I haven't put you all to sleep.
My sinuses were going crazy, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I got to do something." So I'm just gonna bend over. A lot of times, if I do this, if I stop the video, people go, "Where'd you go? Did I lose you?" And so it freaks them out. So I thought, well, I'll just be cool and just kind of nonchalantly try to lean down, and I still got called out on it. Darn it! So.
Oh no! As long as you're healthy and somewhat semi-awake to listen to my pitch.
I didn't stroke out or anything, so we're fine.
Oh, good. Thank
Go
God.
ahead.
Don't have to call 911.
Let's get back to your book.
No, so sorry. So yeah, so it's basically it tells or it shares with parents ways that they can potentially fill the gaps in the educations that they're getting from their schools, and because there are kind of systemic and structural issues that exist that parents may not be able to change right away in their schools. So it's stuff you can do at home based on what I learned in Asia.
Very
and
cool.
It's a fun book. I think a lot of people say they laugh aloud throughout reading it. So, parenting, as you know, is really hard, and you just got to laugh at yourself sometimes.
Sometimes you do. Just step back and realize, hey, I made a mistake, and everybody makes them. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. But just, one of the things that I just want to get involved, be involved with your kids. Don't just have your kids in the house. Okay, they're in the house, but are you up there? Make sure they're still. No, get involved. Be interactive with the kids. And it goes beyond just going to the football field or going to, even the football field to watch your daughter cheer or whatever it may be. It goes well beyond just coaching. And I know I'm getting so excited, my hands are flailing. So,
but it's true. I often say, if you're not raising your kids, who do you think is? I can say in Japan, they teach manners and respect in the classroom, how to sit, how to hold a pencil, how to greet you, all this stuff. And in the US, that's not happening in the classrooms.
You get fired.
Yeah, you pretty much would get fired. So you got to do it at home. Or something that I'm fascinated by is in Japan, in elementary school, every lunch period, they talk about nutrition and how the food came to the table, literally how they plant tomato seeds and how it became a tomato plant, and the whole social studies lesson in distribution and food distribution. And they're thankful for the food, and they have foods from all over the world. And there's a full-time nutritionist who's also a teacher. And it's this amazing, amazing thing, right?
Wow. And
I think about the US and how we have increasing obesity and in our youth and diabetes, and we're the only developed country where our lifespan is actually decreasing.
Right.
Right. And I think about that, and it's like, well, if you're not at home teaching your kids about nutrition, who is? Because oftentimes the school isn't doing it. And if you look at cafeteria food, your kids can be eating hot dogs, hamburgers, processed food, potato chips, and Coca-Cola for most of their school life.
Sure.
So those are the kinds of things, if you don't do it at home, they're not going to learn it anywhere else.
So the message here, folks, is beat your children. And no,
beat them with carrot sticks.
There you go. That sounds great. Beat them with carrot sticks. So, well, Teru, I think I've taken up enough of your time. Although the conversation
has been up yours.
Oh.
I'm glad you're with us though, and you sat back up.
Yeah. Oh, it's my second wind. But honestly, I'm very thankful that you're with me today. It was great talking to you, and I could go on and on and on and on and on, but I'd probably just end up sounding like a broken record. So. I'll keep spinning. I'll keep sharing this message. Look, I'm so excited. Actually, I'm just embarrassed and I can't recover.
That's honest too. We love that too.
I'm just embarrassed that I can't recover, so I'm stuttering. I'm so sorry. Whew. But anyways,
it's all good.
Thank you so very much. We won't lose the message in the laughter here. So again,
everybody buy and read World Class. It's a fun book.
Yes.
And find me, because even if you don't like what I'm saying, reach out to me. I love having these conversations, and really my goal is to help our next generation be as empowered as possible. Awesome.
I think that's a great note to wrap it up on right there.
Yeah,
Teru, thank you so much. Give me just a second. I'll be right back with you, okay?
All right.
Hey, everybody. It's been another awesome episode of the Readily Random Podcast. We had some good laughs today at, my expense, but they're usually at my expense, so that's cool. But anyhow, thank you once again for listening. Pick up Teru's book. We'll do it again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
You could be larger than life.